My daughter demanded I apologize to her rich stepdad for not acknowledging him at her wedding, or she'd cut me off. I ignored her and didn't do it, only to later find out that her stepdad was rather her real dad. What happened next was rather surprising. I will tell you everything. First, tell me where you're watching or listening from. It's always great to hear from you. Feel free to support us by subscribing to this channel, liking and sharing this story. Now here's how everything started. I used to believe that being a good father meant being dependable, showing up, staying steady, even when the rest of the world walked out. That belief kept me grounded after the divorce, when my ex-wife and I went our separate ways, and I found myself navigating single fatherhood with nothing but a strained co-parenting agreement and my own sense of duty. I poured myself into raising our daughter, Sierra. I attended every recital, every parent-teacher night, and I never missed a birthday. Even when my ex made things difficult, I kept the peace for Sierra's sake. I worked extra shifts to make sure she had what she needed: braces, summer camp, a used car when she turned 16. I wasn't perfect, but I was present. I thought that mattered. I thought love and consistency were enough to hold a relationship together, especially a father-daughter bond. But as I would come to find out, sometimes the truth, no matter how buried, has a way of turning everything you thought you knew into dust. When Sierra told me she was getting married, I felt the kind of pride that catches in your throat. I remembered her toddling across the kitchen floor in pigtails and mismatched socks, and suddenly she was asking me to walk her down the aisle. I was thrilled. I offered to pay for the flowers and the DJ, even put down a deposit on the venue when she and her fiancé got into a financial pinch. I gifted her the house I'd inherited from my parents. It was old, needed work, but it was hers. I handed her the keys with tears in my eyes. I also bought her a gently used Lexus as a wedding present, thinking how proud my parents would have been to see her stepping into this new chapter. I wanted her day to be perfect. I wanted her to know that no matter what happened between her mother and me, I had always been in her corner. But even as I stood there at the wedding, in my suit, smiling for photos and shaking hands, something about the way she kept hovering near her stepfather, Craig, rubbed me wrong. I had never liked him. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and acted like he owned it. Flashy, smug, always with a story about his latest investment or some vacation property he was flipping. When Sierra was younger, she used to call him Mom's friend, then Craig, and eventually, my stepdad. I never questioned the timeline too hard. My ex-wife and I had a messy divorce, and there were boundaries I respected because I didn't want to be the kind of ex who made things harder for their child. But something about the way Craig stood at the reception, chest puffed, accepting congratulations from guests like he had raised her, it made my stomach turn. Still, I kept my distance. I didn't want to cause a scene on her big day. I gave my toast, kept it short, sweet, and full of memories from Sierra's childhood, memories I was part of. I didn't mention Craig. Not once. Not because I was trying to be petty, but because I genuinely didn't think he had earned that kind of acknowledgement. He came in when Sierra was already grown. I thought it was understood. I was her father. I didn't expect a trophy, but I also didn't expect what happened next. Later that evening, after the cake had been cut and the dance floor had thinned out, Sierra pulled me aside with a look I hadn't seen before, tight-lipped, cold around the eyes. We stood under a string of fairy lights, near the back patio of the venue, and she folded her arms like she was bracing for a storm. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice low but firm. "About today? About how you acted." I blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean how I acted?" "You completely ignored Craig," she said. "You didn't thank him. You didn't include him in your speech. That was incredibly disrespectful." I stared at her, thinking maybe she was joking. "Sierra, I didn't think this was about him. I thought this day was about you. I'm your father. I paid for half this wedding. I gave you the house you're moving into tomorrow." She didn't flinch. "Craig is the man who's been there for me these past years. He's supported me emotionally and financially in ways you haven't." That hurt, more than I was prepared for. "I've been there every step of the way," I said quietly. "You know that." She hesitated, then hit me with the ultimatum. "I'm asking you to apologize to him. Publicly. Or I'm going to have to take a step back from this relationship." I felt something snap. Not in anger, at least not at first, but in disbelief. I stood there, stunned, as she turned and walked back into the party, leaving me on the patio with the kind of silence that doesn't just hum, it aches. I didn't apologize. I didn't chase after her. I stayed until the end of the night, hugged a few relatives goodbye, and left. I told myself she was just caught up in the wedding stress, that things would cool off. But deep down, something had shifted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing a piece of the puzzle. Something deeper was brewing under that confrontation. Something that would change everything I thought I knew about my daughter, my ex-wife, and the life I had unknowingly funded for years. And I was right. I gave it a few days, thinking maybe Sierra would call. I kept checking my phone, expecting some kind of olive branch, a text, a voicemail, something to say she had overreacted. But all I got was silence. No thank you for the house, no gratitude for the car, just silence. I sat on my porch every evening, looking at the empty swing where she used to sit and sip lemonade during the summers, back when she still called me daddy and begged me to stay 5 more minutes before heading home. Those memories started to feel like someone else's life, a movie I once watched, something fictional. Because the Sierra I faced at that wedding, cold, distant, transactional, wasn't the daughter I raised. Or at least, I had convinced myself she wasn't. I wanted to believe this was temporary, that she was just wrapped up in the excitement of her new life, trying to balance her loyalties between 2 father figures. But there was something else gnawing at me, something much darker, a feeling I couldn't shake. It wasn't until my cousin Jerome came by one weekend, helping me install a new water heater, that the conversation took a turn I never saw coming. He leaned against the kitchen counter, drying his hands, and said casually, "Man, I always thought it was wild that you raised that girl like your own, even though everybody knew she wasn't really yours." The wrench in my hand clattered to the floor. I turned slowly, my voice hollow. "What did you just say?" Jerome looked confused, then cautious. "Wait, you didn't know?" I stared at him, my heart pounding. "Know what? That Craig's her real dad. That your ex had been with him way back, before y'all even split. Hell, some folks say she was with him while y'all were still married. I figured you knew and just didn't care." I couldn't breathe. I sat down at the table, feeling the walls close in. It was like the air had thickened, like the ground beneath my feet had turned to liquid. All those years, all those child support checks. Every weekend I skipped dates or overtime to be there for Sierra. Every holiday I split awkwardly with her mother so Sierra would have a full Christmas. Every proud moment I thought was mine, it wasn't. It had never been. My entire role in her life had been a lie, an illusion supported by my ex-wife's silence and my blind trust. "I need to make a phone call," I said quietly, already reaching for my phone. Jerome offered a weak, "Man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to stir anything up," but I was already dialing. Not Sierra, not my ex. I called my lawyer. When he picked up, I didn't waste time. "I need to revise my will," I said, "immediately. And I need to talk about reclaiming property I've gifted under false pretenses." I hung up before he could finish his surprised response. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. My mind reeled with scenes from Sierra's childhood. Her little hand wrapped around my pinky as we crossed the street. Her high school graduation when she ran into my arms. Her tearful calls during her first year in college. Had it all been performative? Had I been nothing more than a safety net until she no longer needed me? Was my love for her real, but hers only ever conditional? I didn't cry that day. I didn't even scream. I just sat there, hollowed out. The kind of hollow that feels permanent. Like someone reached inside me and ripped out the foundation I'd built my life on. Later that week, I drove to the house I had gifted her and her new husband. I didn't go inside. I didn't knock. I just parked across the street and stared at it. It looked like a home in a magazine. Fresh paint, landscaping just redone, the Lexus parked in the driveway like a bow on a lie. I thought about the hours I spent fixing that place up before the wedding. The money, the labor, the heart. And now it felt like I had handed over a piece of my soul to people who saw me as nothing more than a placeholder. An ATM with a heart. Back home, I opened my filing cabinet, pulled out every receipt, every bank transfer to my ex-wife. The totals made me sick. I had sent her money for everything: school, clothes, medical bills, never questioning where it went. I trusted her because I thought, foolishly, that some part of our history meant she'd honor the role I played in Sierra's life. But now I saw it clearly. She had used me to bankroll Craig's presence in Sierra's life. All those years, I was footing the bill for their fantasy while being kept in the dark like a fool. I didn't hesitate. The next day, I sat down with my lawyer. We drafted a new will, removed Sierra entirely. I initiated the legal steps to revoke the house deed and repossess the car. He warned me it wouldn't be easy, that the optics would be harsh, that people would call me vindictive. But I didn't flinch. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. It was about drawing a line in the sand and refusing to let people piss on me and tell me it's raining. Later that evening, as I walked to my mailbox, I passed a neighbor who smiled and said, "Saw Sierra's wedding photos online. You must be so proud." I smiled back, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Yeah," I said. Something like that. I didn't explain. How could I? Most people only see the surface. They don't know what it feels like to realize your entire parenthood was a con, that you were cast in a role without knowing the script, that everyone else had a copy except you. They don't know what it feels like to bury a child who's still alive because you finally saw who they really were. And worst of all, they don't understand the quiet that follows. The kind of quiet that isn't peace, but aftermath. When I say I marched into my ex-wife's home, I don't mean I slammed doors or shouted. No, it was worse than that. I walked in with the eerie calm of a man who's done mourning and is now ready to excavate the grave. She had invited me over under the pretense of clearing the air, as if the air wasn't already thick with 25 years of deceit. She wore that same smug expression she always did when she thought she was 2 steps ahead. Shoulders relaxed, glass of red wine in hand, acting like I was just another loose end to tie up. I sat down across from her. No small talk, no pleasantries, just eyes locked. I asked one question. Is Craig Sierra's biological father? Her smirk faltered for half a second, half a beat, but that was enough. The pause was louder than a confession. Then she sighed, set her wine down, and gave me the truth like it was some overdue chore. Yes, she said. He is. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. I remember feeling my stomach clench, not from surprise anymore, but from the sheer audacity of her indifference. You let me believe she was mine, I said, my voice low and flat. You let me send money, show up, sacrifice for her. For you, knowing damn well she wasn't even my daughter. You wanted to be her dad, she said, as if that somehow made it okay. And she needed someone. Craig and I weren't stable back then. You were the safe option. The words hit me like a freight train. The safe option. I wasn't a man to her. I was a contingency plan. A walking checkbook with a good heart and no suspicions. And I had played my part so well. Too well. I gripped the edge of her kitchen table, knuckles white, and I asked the next question I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to. How long were you with him? She shrugged. Since before we divorced. A little before. Since before. I repeated, louder now. You mean while we were married? She rolled her eyes. It wasn't like that. Things were already falling apart with us. I cut her off. Don't you dare spin this. You cheated. You got pregnant. And then you handed me the baby and said, "Congratulations, Daddy." She said nothing, just stared at me like I was being dramatic. And maybe I was. But tell me, how's a man supposed to act when he finds out the center of his universe was never his to begin with? I had every right to burn that place down with words, but I didn't. I stood up, straightened my coat, and told her she'd be hearing from my lawyer. I said it without rage, without volume. Just the certainty of a man done pretending. Back in my car, I sat in the driveway for a long while, staring at the steering wheel. I wasn't thinking about the lies, or the money, or even the betrayal. I was thinking about Sierra's face when she was 5, the way she used to press her little palm against my cheek when I tucked her in. I remembered her running through the sprinklers in the yard, her hair matted to her forehead, screaming with laughter. I remembered holding her when she had the flu, her tiny body burning up as I rocked her back and forth, whispering, "Daddy's here. Daddy's got you." And the crushing weight of it all hit me. None of those memories belonged to me. I was the emotional custodian for another man's child, raising her on stolen time, feeding a lie with my love. When I got home, I called Sierra. I gave her one chance. One opportunity to be honest with me, to explain herself, to show even a sliver of remorse. But when she answered, her tone was flat, almost annoyed. "I know why you're calling," she said. "Mom told me." "Told you what?" "That Craig is my biological father." "That you're not." I waited. I waited for the tears, the apology, the guilt. But it never came. "So that's it?" I asked. "You knew and still treated me like a burden at your wedding?" "I didn't want to hurt you," she said. "But I also didn't want to lie to myself anymore. Craig is my real dad. He's always been there in ways you never were." My jaw clenched. "Never were." I repeated. "Sierra, I was there. Every single day. Every night. Every game. Every heartbreak. Where do you think the money came from? The support? The house you're living in right now?" "I appreciate what you did," she said, in a tone that made it clear she didn't. "But I've moved on. I don't want to have this conversation again." She hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone for a long time, the silence ringing louder than anything she could have said. That was the moment I knew the relationship was over. That whatever tie I thought we shared had been cut, not by me, but by her. She didn't just reject me as a father. She erased me like a typo in her rewritten story. I was a footnote in her origin story, nothing more. The next day, I met with my lawyer again and officially began proceedings to sue my ex-wife for fraud. I had proof. Bank transfers, old text messages, photos, dated documents. He said we had a strong case. She had knowingly deceived me, taken money under false pretenses, and used that money to support another man and raise his child without informing me. As I signed the papers, a strange sense of calm washed over me. It wasn't peace. It was clarity. The kind that comes when you stop asking why and start accepting what is. Everyone around me started whispering. Word got out fast. My ex called me selfish. Her friends said I was bitter, cruel. Sierra sent me one last text. "You're ruining everything because you can't let go of the past." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because the past wasn't something I was clinging to. It was something I had just unearthed. And it had teeth. Let them call me names. Let them gossip. Let them pretend I was the villain. I knew the truth now, and it had set me free in the ugliest, most necessary way. They didn't deserve another second of my kindness, my money, or my silence. There's a particular kind of silence that follows betrayal. It's not the soft quiet of peace or the steady hum of solitude. It's the suffocating stillness that lingers in the corners of your home, in the pause between every breath, in the space where a daughter's laughter used to live. After that final conversation with Sierra, I found myself wandering through my house like a stranger. Every framed photo of us, her in pigtails on my shoulders at the zoo, her in cap and gown smiling at her college graduation, I took them down one by one. Each picture was a lie I had paid for in time, emotion, and dollars, a piece of fiction I no longer had the stomach to display. I laid them face down on the kitchen table, staring at the backs of the frames like maybe turning them away would help me forget how deeply I had been duped. It didn't. The day I filed the motion to reclaim the house and the Lexus, my lawyer gave me a long look, the kind people give when they think you're doing something drastic and irreversible. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" he asked. "Once you set this in motion, it's not just legal, it's personal. You'll be burning the bridge entirely." But that bridge had already collapsed. I wasn't the one who set fire to it. I was the one crawling out of the rubble. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I want everything back. The house, the car, and every dollar I can legally reclaim." They built their life on a lie and used me as the foundation. He nodded slowly and got to work, and I felt an odd satisfaction watching the paperwork take shape. This wasn't revenge, it was reckoning. For years, I had given them everything without question. Now I was asking the questions I should have asked decades ago. And the answers had stripped away the last illusions I had about family, love, and loyalty. Of course, the fallout came fast and loud. Sierra showed up to my house the day after she got the legal notice. She didn't knock. Just banged on the door like the world owed her something. When I opened it, she stood there with arms crossed and rage pouring off her like steam from a boiling pot. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she snapped. "You're really trying to take the house back? You gave that to me. You stood in the driveway and handed me the keys like it was some heartfelt moment." I looked at her, not the little girl I raised, but the grown woman who stood in front of me like a stranger, and I said, I gave it to the daughter I thought was mine. That version of reality no longer exists. Her jaw dropped. So now you're punishing me for something I didn't control? You controlled how you treated me, I said coldly. You lied by omission. You knew the truth and still demanded more from me. More money, more love, more loyalty, knowing damn well I was never your real father. She shook her head, furious. You're acting like some bitter ex. You think this is justice? It's petty. It's pathetic. I didn't flinch. You don't get to rewrite what I am to you after you erased me as your father. You made your choice. This is me making mine. She stormed off, slamming the gate behind her so hard it bounced open again. I didn't follow. I closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding, hands shaking, but not from regret. From release. That conversation had been building for years, even if I hadn't known it. And now it was out, raw and real, no more hiding behind smiles or false gratitude. Word spread quickly. Family members called, texted, sent long-winded Facebook messages about how I was overreacting. My sister called me selfish. An uncle I hadn't spoken to in years accused me of having a God complex. One of Sierra's cousins even left a voicemail calling me a bitter old man who just couldn't handle not being the center of attention anymore. I deleted them all, not because they didn't sting, but because they didn't deserve my energy. These were people who saw only what they wanted to see, who believed the polished social media version of events and ignored the decades I spent quietly carrying a lie. What none of them understood was this. I wasn't angry because Sierra wasn't biologically mine. I was angry because she knew and chose to let me live the lie. Because every time I gave her something, time, money, support, she took it with a smile and never once said, "You should know the truth." That's not love. That's exploitation. And I was done being exploited. The hardest part wasn't cutting her off. It was grieving the version of her I had created in my mind, the daughter I thought I had raised, the bond one believed was unbreakable. That grief came in waves, sometimes late at night when I passed her empty room, sometimes in the grocery store when I instinctively reached for her favorite snacks before remembering she no longer existed in my life the way she once did. But with every legal step, I felt lighter. The house was officially placed back in my name. The car was returned, begrudgingly, and with a cracked taillight. The fraud case against my ex was moving steadily through the system. My lawyer said we had a solid claim for restitution, and though I didn't expect to see every dollar again, I wanted the courts to acknowledge what she had done. This wasn't about punishing them. It was about reclaiming myself. The day the last of the legal paperwork came through, I went out to dinner by myself. I ordered steak, had a glass of scotch, and watched the world move on without me. No one in that restaurant knew my name, my story, or the war I had just waged against people I once called family. And that anonymity felt like freedom. When I got home that night, I walked through my house slowly. I opened every door. I touched the walls. I stood in the silence and let it wash over me, this time not as grief, but as peace. I had done what I needed to do. I had drawn the line and stood firm. And no matter what anyone else said, no matter how many whispered behind my back or pointed fingers, I knew I had chosen the truth. And that was something they could never take back. The courthouse smelled like paper and polish, the kind of sterile place where truths are laid bare under fluorescent lights and people's lives are split into motions, arguments, and rulings. I sat at the plaintiff's table wearing a suit I hadn't put on since Sierra's graduation, a symbolic choice I didn't fully process until I caught my reflection in the polished wooden walls. It reminded me that this wasn't just a legal matter. It was a funeral for everything I had once believed about my marriage, my fatherhood, and the people I thought I had loved. My lawyer sat beside me, flipping through folders, but I couldn't focus on the files or the legal jargon. My eyes kept drifting to the other side of the room where my ex-wife sat, still poised, still smug, still wearing that mask of self-righteousness she had perfected over the years. If she felt guilt, she didn't show it. If she felt shame, she masked it behind a neatly tailored blazer and the kind of expression you wear when you think you're untouchable. She had a lawyer too. Some local firm she probably scraped together with Craig's money. The same money I had been unknowingly funneling into their lives for years. They whispered together, occasionally glancing in my direction like I was some overreacting ex who didn't know how to let things go. But they didn't know what it was like to wake up one day and realize your entire sense of identity was built on someone else's deception. They didn't understand what it meant to be used as a surrogate father, to love someone deeply, purely, only to learn that your love had been manipulated into a transaction. They could pretend this was just a property dispute or a civil case about fraud, but for me, it was a reckoning, and I came with receipts. When the judge called the room to order, I sat up straight. My lawyer presented everything we had compiled: bank statements, text messages, proof of deposits, notarized affidavits from old friends who had overheard conversations, even a timeline that clearly showed I had been financially responsible for Sierra since birth under the belief she was my biological daughter. The pivotal evidence came when we submitted a paternity test I had taken quietly a month ago, confirming what I already knew in my gut. Sierra was not biologically mine. That was the final blow, the cold stamp of reality that validated my anger and fortified my resolve. My ex-wife's defense was paper thin. She claimed I had always known, or at the very least suspected, and that I had willingly taken on the role of father, knowing the truth. Her lawyer tried to frame it as an act of love, arguing that shared emotional history should supersede biology or legal definitions. I wanted to laugh. Love? Is that what she was calling it now? Love doesn't lie to your face for over 2 decades. Love doesn't take your money, your time, your heart, and feed it into someone else's life without your knowledge. When I took the stand, I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I spoke with the calmness of a man who had walked through fire and emerged with his skin still intact. I told the court about the years I spent raising Sierra, how I taught her to ride a bike, stayed up nights when she had a fever, worked overtime to buy her prom dress. I talked about the house I gifted her, the car, the tuition payments. And then I told them how I found out the truth, how it wasn't just a betrayal of marriage, but a theft of identity. I wasn't seeking revenge, I told them. I was seeking justice for the years, dollars, and pieces of myself that had been taken without consent. The courtroom was quiet when I stepped down. My ex didn't meet my eyes. Her lawyer tried to spin her narrative during closing arguments, but the damage was done. The judge ruled in my favor, ordering her to repay a substantial portion of the funds I had unknowingly given under false pretenses. It wouldn't replace what I had lost emotionally, but it sent a clear message. Lies have consequences. Manipulation has a cost. After the ruling, my ex approached me in the hallway. Her tone had shifted. Gone was the arrogance, replaced now with a shallow attempt at civility. "You didn't have to go this far," she said. "We could have settled this like adults." I looked at her, really looked at her, the woman I once loved, once trusted with everything, and I felt nothing. Not hate, not rage, just absence. The space where affection used to live had gone hollow. "I gave you 25 years to tell the truth," I said. "You settled it the day you decided to lie." She flinched, just barely, then turned and walked away. As for Sierra, she never came to court. She didn't call, didn't write. I imagined she heard the outcome through someone else, or maybe she was too ashamed to face what this all meant. That her entire upbringing had been funded by a man she now claimed wasn't her real dad. I don't know what stories she tells herself to sleep at night. Maybe she believes I'm cruel. Maybe she's convinced herself that blood is the only currency that matters. But I know the truth. I know what I gave her. And more importantly, I know what I've reclaimed. Back at home, I opened the mailbox and found a sympathy card from an old friend I hadn't heard from in years. Inside was a handwritten note that said, "You didn't lose a daughter. You lost a lie. There's freedom in that." And God help me, it was true. That night, I sat in the backyard under a sky so clear it looked like glass, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the weight of loss. I felt the shape of my new beginning. Not the one I would have chosen, but the one I needed. The one I earned. It's strange, the way the world keeps spinning after your own personal earthquake. How cars still drive past your house like nothing's happened. How neighbors wave from across the street like your insides aren't splintered in places you didn't even know existed. After the courtroom battle and all the noise settled, what came next wasn't relief. It wasn't celebration. It was stillness. A deep, unnerving stillness. The kind that creeps in when the last door slams shut, and you realize there's no more pretending, no more explaining, no more hoping for some miraculous patch to fix what's been torn open. I had won the legal fight, yes, but I'd also stepped into a reality where my daughter was no longer mine. Not by blood, not by name, not even by memory. And in that quiet, I started asking myself the hardest question of all: who am I now? I was no longer a father in the way I had once been. That role, so central to my identity, had been stolen and then discarded like a prop after a play. I had spent over 2 decades tying my self-worth to Sierra's happiness, to her milestones, to her voice calling me dad. I defined myself through her achievements, her struggles, her presence at the dinner table. And now, I had to unravel all of that. I had to peel away every layer built on a lie and stand there, raw, as a man stripped of the most meaningful title he had ever known. Some mornings, I'd wake up and forget, just for a second. I'd reach for my phone, thinking to text her about a football game or some article I found online she might like. Then I'd remember, and that second would hit like a punch to the chest. I didn't spiral. I didn't drink or rage or call her in desperation. But I did mourn. I let myself mourn deeply, without rushing through it or trying to slap a lesson on top too quickly. I mourned not just the loss of Sierra, but the years I spent being lied to. The birthdays where Craig's shadow probably lingered just out of sight. The parent-teacher nights where I shook hands with educators, thinking I was the sole provider behind her success. The college graduation where she hugged me, whispered, "Thank you for everything," and I believed, stupidly, that she meant it. I had given her the best of me. She gave me a role to play until the credits rolled and the lights came up, and I was expected to exit quietly. The bitterness came in waves, usually triggered by the smallest things: a commercial with a father and daughter, a dad giving a toast at a wedding on TV. Sometimes it crept in while I was folding laundry and came across one of her old sweatshirts I hadn't yet thrown away. But I let it come. I let the anger sit with me like an old friend who overstayed his welcome, because pushing it away only made it more persistent. I'd sit on my porch, sip coffee, and let the rage and sorrow intermingle until they lost their sharpness, until they were just facts instead of feelings. Yes, I had been betrayed. Yes, I had been used. But no, I would not let that define the rest of my life. People started to notice the change in me. Some kept their distance, unsure of how to talk to the man who had publicly disowned his daughter. Others came closer, emboldened by the drama, wanting the full story like it was some juicy family saga. I gave them nothing. I didn't know anyone explanations. Not after all the explanations I had given Sierra that she shrugged off. Not after the years I spent being the dependable one, the rock everyone leaned on. Now, I leaned on myself. One day, weeks after everything had been finalized, Sierra sent a letter. Handwritten. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity, that cruel little thing, won out. Her handwriting was the same, looped and elegant, like her mother's. The letter was short. No apology. No admission of guilt. Just a vague attempt at wanting to reconnect one day if things cooled down. She wrote, "I understand if you don't want to talk to me now, but I hope you know I never meant to hurt you." I folded the letter and placed it in the back of my filing cabinet. Not because it meant anything, but because throwing it away would imply it had power. It didn't. Her words couldn't undo the years she let me believe a lie. They couldn't erase the way she demanded I apologize to Craig as if I were the outsider in her life. She wanted forgiveness without reckoning. I wasn't handing it over like spare change. In therapy, which I started shortly after the lawsuit, my counselor asked me something that stuck with me. If you could go back, knowing everything you know now, would you still raise her the same way? It took me a long time to answer, but eventually I said yes. Because the man I was, the father I had tried to be, was real, even if the circumstances weren't. My love for Sierra wasn't fake, even if her lineage was. I was a good father, a damn good one, and I won't let their lies taint that truth. Now, when I sit on the porch and watch the world pass by, I feel something new. Not joy, not sadness, but equilibrium. A steadiness. I'm not waiting for an apology that will never come. I'm not hoping for a reunion. I'm living in a chapter where I'm no longer someone's safety net, no longer someone's fallback plan. I've reclaimed my time, my heart, my legacy. And if people want to call me selfish for that, Let them. I know the difference between selfishness and self-preservation. And this right here, is survival. Let them gossip. Let them spin their versions of the story. At the end of the day, I walked through the fire and didn't just survive. I chose to live on my own terms. I sleep well now. Not because everything ended perfectly, but because I ended it before it could eat me alive. Sometimes the deepest cuts come from the people closest to us. What would you have done in my shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments. Because setting boundaries, even with family, isn't cruelty. It's clarity. If this story resonated with you or made you think twice about loyalty, love, and truth, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There's more to come. Real stories, real emotions, and real consequences. Let's keep this conversation going. See you soon in the next story.